So you have different processes of cooking which do different things to the formula, changes the synergy of the formula. For example, at any kind of xiexintang, so gansao, shengjiang, or bangsha xiexintang, when you cook that formula, you cook it from roughly 2.4 mils down to 1200. Then you remove the herbs, and then you take the liquid and you boil the liquid down to 600, 6 sheng down to 3 sheng. In that process, you're harmonizing the flavors.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Qiological, the podcast that connects the voices of our acupuncture and East Asian medicine community to itself. I'm a little surprised at the number of students that listen to the podcast. I've gotten quite a few emails over the past 6 months or so. I've had students express appreciation for the podcast as it gives some perspectives beyond what's being taught in schools. And sometimes there's some griping about, air quotes here, just getting TCM, and that they're not learning aspects of the medicine that are not on the national exam. I think these students have put their fingers on a vital pulse here. But in blaming the schools, I think they're missing the mark of diagnosing the problem. Schools aren't the problem. The world we live in that asks for standardization, I suspect that's where the problem lies. Schools teach to the test because, really, all schools teach to some kind of test. Students need to pass a licensure exam, and it's the school's job to make sure that they do. Many schools publish the pass rate on their students, and if you're a student who chose your school based on that, well, then you're complicit as well. Actually, we all are. We all want standards, we want licensure, we want to know that the people who have the same degree that we do and the same license that we do, that they have enough of what it takes so that our profession advances. Yes, you do have to pass a certain bar to enter this club, and you need some gumption and some smarts and some compassion and willingness to work out all kinds of things that you don't yet understand. So somehow a standard gets created, and for good reasons, but then it's easy to focus on the standard and conflate it with completion. That if we make that bar, then we understand the medicine. If we do that, then we've made a grave mistake, because getting a degree and a license doesn't mean you understand the medicine. It means you have enough to get started. It means you have the tools and potential to begin learning from your own unsupervised clinical experience. I understand this is an enormous frustration for many, and many people feel cheated that after 3 to 4 years of school and tens of thousands of dollars spent, they feel less than completely prepared. And I suspect this is why there are numerous coaches and consultants who help people get through their first years of practice. This is why there are mentorship programs, 2-year courses that will take you deeper into medicines that you didn't get on the national exam. And in all this noise and commotion, TCM often gets the blame for our shortcomings. I'd like to share a few thoughts on this. I don't think TCM is a problem. It's a stream of medicine that, due to conditions and circumstances, has found its way from China to the West and into our legal and professional systems. It is a part of the stream of medicine that has evolved and changed over centuries. It's not wrong. It might be incomplete, and it might be that due to our own deficiencies, we don't completely understand it well enough to get the kinds of clinical results we'd like to see. But I don't think it's the enemy. It's a part of the current in this moment in time that allows us to enter the stream of medicine. And most importantly, it gives us a common language. Go anywhere in the world, and with the basics that you learn in school, you should be able to have a conversation with any other doctor of East Asian medicine and share your clinical experience and be able to learn from theirs. Anywhere in the world that I've traveled, in English or in Chinese, I found I could talk to the doctors there. Go to China or Japan or Taiwan or Korea, you'll share enough common ideas around medicine that you should be able to learn something new. Granted, those doctors may not work in the ways that you do, but the basics that you learn from TCM, it's going to allow you access to the other streams of thought and practice. You know, all nets catch fish. And while it's true that different nets catch different kinds of fish, What's more important is that you know how to use the net that you've got. Most of us will find that we are drawn to different aspects of medicine as we become seasoned with practice. And while it's easy in the service of marketing our practices to show that we are distinctive in one way or another, in the end, it's probably not helpful to boost our practice up by pushing another's practice down. We all walk through the gate of TCM in the West. I don't think it's wrong. It's just how things have evolved. And if we learn our fundamentals and learn them well, then we can access the wide and varied streams of practice that you don't learn about in school. A degree and a license in Chinese medicine does not mean we understand Chinese medicine. It means we have an opportunity to engage in a practice that no doubt will transform with the passing of years. And if you've been listening to the podcast here, you'll know that the insights and the methods of the practitioners that you've listened to here, they all stem from a series of fundamentals that allowed us to begin to see the world in terms of yin and yang, 5-phase transformations, the 6 levels of climactic influence, and how our psychology isn't separate from our physiology. As Westerners, we don't have the option of leaving behind our Western thinking. It's just part of who we are. And we don't get to avoid the influence of TCM. It's part of the soup that we swim in. It's the gate we walk through. The idea is to keep on walking. Oh man, I probably should have put a soapbox warning on that. If you've got other thoughts on this, please feel free to share them with me via email or over on the Facebook group. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. All the sponsors here provide helpful products or services that you'll find beneficial in your clinical work. Want to get better at treating concussions and other neurological conditions? Clayton Shu has some innovative methods. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. Later in the show, Jane offers you helpful suggestions on how to raise your rates, and Golden Flower, Chinese Herbs, shares a journey of healing that I think you'll recognize. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Geological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more. Ever found yourself listening to a geological conversation and thinking, wow, I needed to hear that? Yeah, me too. And I never know when I'm going to hear a guest say something that stops my world and reboots it with a larger perspective. If these conversations have ever helped you to feel more grounded, more inspired, or just less alone in this strange and wonderful work we do, consider becoming a member or supporting the podcast with a bit of tithing to the donation jar. It helps keep the lights on here at the Geological Sound and Motion Lab so that we can bring you these conversations every Tuesday morning. You'll find all the details at geological.com. Thanks for listening and for being a part of this.
Hey there, I'm Cameron Jafari, an acupuncturist from Los Angeles. So I started learning nanopuncture from Dr. Clayton Shu because I was facing these complex neurological conditions like stroke and MS in my clinic, and I just felt like I lacked a solid process to treat them. Brain-related issues always felt like a whole different animal, and I was looking for a clinical system that worked and could guide me through them. So after attending my first nanopuncture seminar, I was able to apply the process pretty quickly and with pretty amazing results. I remember the first stroke patient I saw afterwards was a guy who had had a stroke 2 years back and he couldn't talk at all. And after a few treatments, he started saying a few words. And a few treatments after that, he could actually have conversations. It was pretty incredible. So this is why I feel like nanopuncture is the future of acupuncture neurology. And you can be a part of that. Their next seminar is on treating concussions and is being co-taught by both Dr. Shu and Dr. Ayla Wolf in New York City on April 26th and 27th. To learn more, visit nanopunctureseminars.com.
Simon Feeney, welcome to Geological.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a real honor and a pleasure. I've been listening to your podcast for some time, and it's just been wonderful, inspiring, and interesting, and all things good, all things Chinese medicine.
Wow. Well, thank you for that plug. I appreciate it. I'm excited to talk to you. I should never say things like that to my guests. I should never say I'm excited to talk to you, because I'm actually excited to talk to everybody that I'm talking to. It's just kind of the way this podcast rolls.
It's great. I love your attitude to it, and I think when we were speaking on the phone, you were saying that you just wanted it to be spontaneous. So I haven't prepared, so I thought I'd just go along with that whole ideology. Thought it was great.
When it comes to preparation, and the reason why I don't think too much about preparation for this is because we're already prepared. Because the kinds of things that we explore, the kinds of things we're going to get into, the kind of stuff I want to talk to you about, you don't need to prepare your life. You've been doing your life.
Yeah, you'd like to think so. Yeah.
No, but it's absolutely true. I mean, even when we're going at times off the rails, we're still doing our life, and it's usually taking us somewhere. I mean, there are no straight lines in nature, and there's no straight lines in our life either. So sometimes even the things that seem like, oh my God, what the hell am I doing? Sometimes you look back in 10 years and you go, oh my God, I was spot on. I had no idea. You know what I'm talking about? Have you ever had
100%. I think it's great. I remember, what was it you said I was reading at the bottom of your email the other day. It said something like, it's difficult to tell the differences between things falling apart and things coming back together or falling together, or something like that.
It's difficult to tell the difference between things falling apart and things falling together.
There you go. I just love that idea, and it really puts things into perspective. Yeah. So yeah, let's hope inspiration takes us on a journey today, and hopefully your listeners can indulge us a little.
Well, I suspect inspiration has already taken us on this journey. And one of the things that I'm always curious to know about other people that have found their way into the Chinese medicine world, especially us honky Westerners, is what caught your attention? What drew you into Chinese medicine?
Well, for me, Chinese medicine came at the end of my journey, because my journey began after I was snowboarding. I used to be a professional snowboarder. So after I finished that...
Wait a minute. Professional snowboarder?
Yeah, so I used to be in competitions nationally and internationally.
Like half pipe and going upside down and triple turns and all that crazy stuff?
Mainly big air jumps, yeah, and border cross. And then as I got into other things, I went, did a lot of backcountry riding. And then I just got met some people and, got into this vegetarian thing. And then I went to the extremes and went vegan. At one point I was fruitarian. And then, so that kind of, I wouldn't recommend that again, but it was an interesting journey. And that led me to getting inspired by people, the Franciscan monk. So, St. Francis of Assisi, I heard about St. Francis of Assisi one day, and then I just thought that was amazing, that I was just so into possessions and, material things like, snowboarding is a world of, and competition and all this sort of stuff. And then just couldn't believe that someone would renounce women, clothing, lifestyle, all these things, and just take off all their clothes and go and live in nature.
Not to mention give up lift passes.
Give up what? Sorry.
Lift passes.
That's it. Absolutely. Well, I started, just walking up the hills, and I refused to get on the lifts. And
Really? So part of your journey was I'm walking up the damn hill,
yeah,
then I'm going to ride down.
well, I just felt, you had to earn it. If you're going to ride down, you have to earn. And it inspired a different kind of riding for me. And, a lot of more backcountry stuff was more interesting. But it isolated me from the community and from everyone. And I just made everyone feel terrible all the time because I was always, doing the opposite to them. So I kind of got out of that world and then gave up all my possessions, took off my shoes. I basically had a pair of hemp pants, no underpants, and a hemp t-shirt and a little hemp bag with a bottle of water. And I just went exploring, and just basically just kept walking around and I was looking for a monk, and I didn't care what kind of monk I could find. I just wanted to meet a monk because I just thought this idea is just ridiculous. There couldn't possibly be humans on this planet. It was just so far from my concept of what life was. And I heard about this monk was in this area. And the night before I met him, I had this dream that I was going to meet him, and it was going to happen in a series, in a sequence. So I was going to go to this place, then I'm going to go to this place, then I'm going to go this place, about 6 places. And at the 6th place, I was going to leave, and I was going to turn around, and then that person was going to tell me where it was. And the following day, I followed that process. It seems a little bit strange to tell the story, but this is really what happened. And then I got to the 6th place, and I was walking out, and I remember thinking, this can't be true. And then all of a sudden, this lady called me back and said, "Oh, you're looking for this monk? Oh, yeah, he's just up the road." And I found this monk. I went walking into this this church because I thought a monk kind of would live at a church, and knocked on the door, and there was a priest in there, and he said, I said, "Are you a monk?" And he said, "No." He was just doing some paperwork. Some guy with no shoes.
Doing the email here.
Yeah. And he said, no, I'm not a monk. And I didn't like the place. It was all very clean and had, perfect car parks. And he said, "No, I'm not a monk, but there's a monk next door." And I said, "Oh, really?" And he said, "Yeah, but he's Buddhist." And I said, "I didn't care."
Because you're just looking for a monk.
I was looking for a monk.
Uh-huh.
And I went next door, and this guy, and it was just run down, old temple, just grass growing everywhere and herbs all over the place, and this old caravan broken down. And I knocked on the door, and I waited a while, and it was really quiet inside, and just everything in my body just went peaceful. And then this door just creaked open, and the smell of incense and this kind of purple golden light came out. And he goes, "Yes." And I said, "Hi, my name's Simon. Are you a monk? I heard that there's a monk here. Can I?" And he said, "Yes, I am a monk." And I said, I was wondering if I could just come in and talk to you a little bit about, what you think about life." And he said, "Sure, come in." And we sat down and talked philosophy for about 5 hours or so. And he just blew my mind. And he's been my teacher for the last 20. I'm getting older every year. I think about this, but he's over 20 years now. 20, maybe when I was, 23 years or so. And I was a temple boy at his temple, and then we traveled all over Thailand and Burma.
So this started out, you were in Oz, correct?
Yeah, this is all in Australia. Yeah, in Canberra.
Right.
It's the capital. Yeah.
So you're looking for this monk, you find this Buddhist guy.
Mm.
So what's his affiliation? I mean, what's his backstory, and how come you're ending up in Thailand and all these other places?
So one day we were having lunch, and as we always did, and he said to me, "Simons, I want to go to Thailand. You come?" I said, "Sure." "Okay, we go. 2 weeks." "Okay." And we got on a plane, and I took him because he just got his passport. So he was from Myanmar. It was Burma, and now he's from an ethnic minority in Burma called Mon, M-O-N. And they are, yeah. So there's Hmong, and there's Hmong, and then there's Mon. So the Mon people were overthrown by the Burmese king about 300 years ago, and they had a kingdom called Hongsawatoi. And that kingdom was vast. It covered all of Burma, all through the Thai Peninsula, into Bangkok. They reached all the way through that area of Southeast Asia. And as the Burmans came down and the Chinese came down, and then the Indians as well coming from one side, the Thais from the east, they slowly sort of shrank into this little state. Now it's called Bon State in present-day Myanmar. So their language is very old, and the Burmese language comes from their language. But the story goes that the Burmese king, when he gave the language to the Mon king, when he gave the language to the Burmese king, he kept 2 consonants. And the reason he did that was because those were associated with the Pali scripture, or the scripture, the Buddhist scripture. So they could take all the politics and the education and they could have access to language and the written word, but they could never get deep into the philosophy of Buddhism, because the 2 Mon brothers brought Buddhism to Burma.
And they kept a piece of the language for themselves
to interpret these old texts, and to read their interpretations of the old Pali scripture. So that's how the language came down. So my teacher is he used to be one of 5 people in the world who could read this. Now he's one of 3 people in the world who can read this, and he is the top of those 3. He is an absolute treasure, and so his language was getting the manuscripts were getting lost. No one was able to read these anymore, but they held valuable information, and some of them single pieces of scripture. One time I asked recently in a trip we went to Burma recently, and I asked him, Bundy, what's the oldest scripture that you've found? And without a second hesitation, he said 1078. And I said, oh, right. So the oldest sort of, because it's written down and then it's copied and then it's copied and it's copied and it's copied and it's copied and copied. And so you'll get
a lot of Chinese medicine books came down the same way.
Precisely.
Huh.
So then he said to me, yeah, it's 1078. So I said, you mean, 1,780, as in like 10,000. No, 1,778 years old, the actual piece of parchment. And I just, this is amazing. So we were just handling things that were 200, 300, 400 years old, some 700 years old. And by the time they get to sort of 700, 800 years, they really start to fall apart. And so we went to take some of those manuscripts out of the country, because the monasteries were getting burnt, the monks were getting killed, the villages were getting taken over. So they had to be preserved. And so I digitalized those. So my job was to basically photograph and document all of those scriptures, put them on a hard drive.
So you're basically like this modern day monk, but instead of transcribing from one ancient piece of parchment to a new one, you're digitizing it.
Yeah, and then we put it on his computer, and then he would be able to, and then it would be preserved, because they were just getting lost. And just recently, not recently, a year and a half ago, we went there, and we found this island that hadn't been accessed by many people. So the monk that was the abbot of that monastery was over 100 years old, and he had never seen a white person. So he'd never seen someone like Caucasian. He had never left the temple. And so he'd basically been on this island his whole life, and he was over 100 years old, and he'd never met any Burmans or any tourists coming over, because no one could access the island. Anyway, recently, only a year prior to us being there, this bridge was built over to this island. And so we went over there after this bridge was built, and my teacher was very excited because he'd never seen these scriptures. And so he went over there, and no one, and we found this huge temple, and there was this huge wall. I'm talking probably 10 meters tall, and it's just this huge shrine just built on layer on layer on layer on layer over the years. And the sort of the top section, we climbed all the way up to the top and got behind it. And he was yelling from the bottom, "What's there? What's there?" And I said, "Bunty is full of teak chests." And he said, "The teak chests, good, open them." So we cracked these teak chests, and you had to take apart the shrine, because the shrine was built on top of the teak chests over the years. So we open up the thing, and it is full with scripture, absolutely full. I'm talking 9 huge tea chests full of scripture. I took videos of the whole process, and they were perfectly preserved, and they've been there hundreds and hundreds of years. And I said to Bun, this is so funny that we're coming from Australia and doing this, because Australia was founded, it was colonized, after these were put in this temple. We're just having a little laugh. Anyway.
So you guys are like Indiana Jones. So you and him, you trail around, you get these scripts. Can you read these scriptures?
I can't. No, I can't. Nobody, I mean, like I said,
but he does.
Yeah, there's only a couple of people in the world who can read them.
Does he do translations of them? What's happening with them? I mean, here we are, we're supposed to talk about Chinese medicine, and now we're like deep into Buddhist relics.
Yeah.
All right.
You can edit whatever you need out.
No, this is great. I mean, it's always so curious, the paths that we take. It's usually unexpected. I mean, none of us in our high school, career counseling experience had someone go, "Why don't you think about Buddhism or Chinese medicine or something like that?" No one says that, right? We wander into this stuff on our own. We just get lucky, and we go off on a tangent.
We do. Yeah.
So I just want to know, is your teacher taking this stuff and translating it, making it accessible to the rest of us?
He is. He wrote a really a large book that was translating the old grammar. So he's a linguist, basically. So he translates the old grammar into the sort of current, explains the grammar of the ancient language in current day Mon, and then references it to a lot of the Pali language, because there's a lot of study done in Pali, and so he talks about that grammar, because it's very, very complicated grammar, and that what it comes down to.
Such a geeky guy, isn't he?
He's amazing. He is something else.
So is any of this in English, or is it just in Hmong?
No, it's in Mon and Pali. Yeah,
Mon and Pali. Yeah, you got to be deep into it to get it, huh?
Oh, this is deep. This is heavy. Yeah, this is heavy study. Yeah, it's very, very. His specialty is the monastic order. So how monks conduct themselves in their relationship to society. That's pretty much what he focuses on.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that I use to keep my practice running smoothly. So let's talk about something that can be a little bit uncomfortable: raising your fees. I know, this is something that might feel awkward, but it doesn't have to. With a bit of planning and care, you can handle it in a way that feels right for you and your patients. One tip: give yourself at least 2 months to prepare. This gives you time to get comfortable with the change and let your patients know what's happening. You can share the news through emails, booking reminders, or even just a friendly little sign in your clinic, and avoid over-apologizing. Instead, keep it straightforward and matter-of-fact. Keeping things consistent across the ways that you communicate can really help avoid confusion. Fee increases aren't always easy, but you're not on your own here. For more tips and ideas on how to communicate these changes with confidence, check out frontdesk.chain.app and look for the article, How to Tell Your Clients You're Raising Your Fees. Oh, and one last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, use the code CHIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. So here you are, this ex-snowboard dude, hanging with this monk. What are you learning from this cat?
Just meditation and philosophy. And then he says to me one day, I noticed that these scriptures, they're a little bit smaller than the other ones. And I said, Bunty, what's with these little scriptures? And he said, they're medicine texts. I said, why are they smaller? Why are they cut smaller? He said, because the monks could put them in their robes and then travel. or put them in their herbs and then go and look at the trees and this and sort of stuff, or go to a village and then be able to pull them out and know what to prescribe.
Right. How to help people.
How to help people. So that's fascinating. What kind of things does it treat? I'm looking through this and I see all these charts, and he's like, oh, that's for, it's just the flu, and this is for that, and this is for this, and this is for that. And then he said to me, oh, this is for, what's that condition where your legs are all, your body's all welting, falling apart, and your skin's falling off. And I said, oh, leprosy? Oh, yeah, leprosy. That formula treats leprosy. Right. And he said, oh, it's a very, very good one. And then basically over the years just saw that it was everything from, the common cold to black magic. And the monks needed to understand all of this to be effective in their treatment of the community, to the Sangha, because that would perpetuate their own existence and help people. So,
well, and plus, your job as a monk is to relieve suffering.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
And what I noticed in one temple was that I was talking about this particular, he said, oh, this is a particular plant, that's a particular plant. And he said, oh, it's just out the front. And then it's just, this one's out the front, this one's over there. And it was always in the vicinity of the monasteries. And then what had happened over time is monks would plant those trees around the temples. And so when you go outside some of these temples, it's just full of medicinal plants. And these kids, the monks would just say, hey, kid, scurry up this plant and get that leaf. It's springtime, the moon's right, blah, blah, blah. And they would scurry up the tree, collect these things, come and dry them and make this medicine for the monks. And it's just fascinating. I just thought, there's so much information here. I want to do something. I want to help him. I want to help the people that are impoverished and come from a different, that can't snowboard. I really wanted to buy them a snowboard. No, I'm just joking. But
but seriously, so you're hanging with this monk. I mean, are you making a living? Are you living at the monastery? What's your life look like at this moment?
Just living at the monastery, just eating the food at the temple and what was given to me.
So you went looking for a monk and you turned into one.
Well, yeah, I was ordained, but years later, but I never ordained. So I was, ordained for a short period of time, but I just stayed as a temple boy and just took care of my teacher.
Uh-huh. Just the medicinal temple boy.
Yeah. And then he said to me one day, he said, okay, Simon, it would have been about, I didn't really know what they were doing. I was just watching. I watched the way that they made pills and ground things and dried things and prepared things. But I never really learned. Like, nobody really teaches you there. It's a different kind of education. And then one day, it was probably about, I reckon I was with him probably 11, 12 years. And then he said to me one day, we were sitting down quietly, and he said to me, turmeric. And my ears just perked up. This is the first time he actually was going to give me a discourse on a herb, the medicinal properties of a herb.
Oh my God. You've been hanging with him for 11 years, and now you're beginning to get a discourse.
Yep. And so he said, turmeric given like this, mixed with that, is good for women like this, like that, and basically gave me an explanation. I was just trying to take it all in.
And you're not studying medicine at this time.
No,
you're just being a temple boy.
Yep. And I listened and I paid attention. Then he would ask me questions to test me. Like, pick up that plant on the ground here and tell me a little bit about it. And so I'd eat it, and I'd say, it tastes like this. It does this afterwards. And you go, what does it treat? And I'd say, oh, it feels like it's doing this to my stomach, that to my stomach. And then he'd say, eat this for a week and meditate on it and whatever. So then it was a very traditional teaching. But years went on, and I kind of needed to grow up a little bit. And he said, no one's going to take you seriously, Simon. Like, I tried to apply for a grant for doing some study and writing a book on the medicinal substances of the Mon people and the formulas. I learnt a lot, talked to a lot of practitioners, a lot of monks, and started writing this book. And then I tried to get a grant for it, and just, no one would take me seriously. Where's your credentials?
Who the hell are you? Temple boy.
Who
are you?
Yeah, that's it. So he said, I can't give you a piece of paper, and you need to go and get yourself a piece of paper. So off I went, and I thought, I'll just go to Melbourne in Australia. I was going to live in Melbourne with someone I was seeing, and I said, and I was like, oh, herbal medicine course. This looks interesting. And so I signed up, and that was a degree in Chinese medicine.
And then you got your paper.
And yeah, 5 years later, I got my degree, and then went out and was disenfranchised by the traditional Chinese medicine model. And then I did an undergraduate with a diploma with Arno Versluis through ICEM, and met Arno and haven't looked back.
Okay, so I want to dig into this for just a moment. When you say disenfranchised, what happened?
Well, I noticed that a lot of the ideology that people have when they enter into Chinese medicine is very very romantic, but when reality comes, it's completely different. So, for example, Qinghao, Qinghao Artemisia annua. So
Of course.
I remember doing a paper on Qinghao dispensed in different ways, and how Qinghao, as an extracted granule had this effect on malaria, and then as a powder has this effect, and then cooked up in a decoction has this effect, and then I can't remember the name of the lady, but she got a Nobel Prize in science for this recently, and
Yeah, it was recent. It was in the
it was
past
a
year or
couple of
so.
years ago. It was, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember studying that paper and just thinking, this is what it comes down to. The fact that she took it out, she wrung out the juice, and then it activated it was much more effective against some of these malarial strains. And it was very interesting to me because I was working on the Thai-Burma border, and there was just a lot of malaria there. And so it was really fascinating. But when it came to practice, everyone was not using raw herbs, or just using powders, or using the wrong dosages, or using the wrong herbs, and then administering it wrong. So I was just thinking, something's got to change here. And I was fortunate enough to meet some very good herbalists and people who are doing it, as traditionally as they could. And when I got to clinic, I started realizing that if I want to do this, I'm going to do this properly. So when something was a tongue, I would use it as a tongue, a decoction. When something was a san, a powder, I would use it as a powder. And if something was a wan, I'd use it as a wan, a pill.
Right. And because this is how you learned it from the Buddhist monk that you were living with, being the temple boy for.
Well, I just thought the source, that there was so much emphasis on administration and preparation, and it was just being discarded by Chinese medicine. It was just, oh yeah, just boil it from here to here. And they were the good guys. They were the people who were doing it properly, consider doing it properly.
Right. No, but what I mean is you already had learned some of this stuff by being with your teacher and studying herbs. Is this correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of how to prepare things, absolutely. How to administer them in different ways. And I just thought that was just being lost in the current paradigm of Chinese medicine.
Right, because we don't even know from what dynasty it comes from. We look at a formula and go, oh, Chinese medicine, that's Chinese medicine. But we don't know, was it Han Dynasty? Was it Tang Dynasty? I mean, those are really different circumstances.
Yeah, very much so. And so, my focus was just on the classical stuff, because it was just, okay, we're just going to start with the foundations. Everything else is kind of built on that. So went back to the foundations of the Shanhan Zabin Lun, the Shanhan Lun, and the Jingwei Yao.
Would you say that the stuff that you learned from this Buddhist teacher of yours, was it more of a classical medicine? Was it more of a Shanghan type medicine, or was it something else?
I was always hoping for him to say, oh, this is a formula that treats, the cold from the wind or something. And then, oh yeah, what's in it, Bunty? And oh, it's got some cinnamon, oh, it's got some peony, ginger. But he never said that. So it's a very different, it's based on Ayurvedic medicine.
Okay. So are the herbs that you learned with him more of Ayurvedic herbs? Or was there a smattering of Chinese herbs? How would you say what you learned from him jibes with, say, what you learned with Arnaud?
It doesn't really but in the sense that the diagnosis is very, very different. the administration is very, very different. So yeah, there are two very different things. I think maybe if I could separate them. So when I met Arnaud, I was asking him about the original dosages of the Shanhanlun formulas, because I'd never met anyone like him. In Australia, we were weren't as fortunate as you guys are in the US, having a little bit more history in your practitioners and a bit more experience. We're getting there, but
I don't know. I've heard it said that in many ways the Australians have it over us Americans because you're closer to China, and there's been much more exchange between Chinese and Western people for a longer time in Australia than there has been in the United States. I've heard it said that way as well.
Okay, maybe it's just that I find Americans do things very well. They take things to a different level of sophistication. I've thought we're very haphazard in Australia, so.
Oh man, you should come spend some time here in the United States and see how haphazard we can be.
Really?
I think so. At any rate,
Okay.
what it sounds like is you had this amazing experience with your teacher that set you down the road of learning and working with herbs. You go and you get your basic TCM education, which, it's the gate that we all walk through. You got to learn a common language. We got to pass a test. And then we actually get to start learning medicine. And you happen to cotton to what Arnaud has. That's
right. And when I started reading these old texts, I was so excited. It's got this preparation, it's got that preparation. There's all these weird dosages, and I was just in my element. And I got really excited. And so when I met Arnaud, I started asking him, what's this Liang thing and Sheng thing and Zhu and Fen and Sheng and Do and He and all this stuff. And he said...
Right, because there's all these different dosages in the Chinese when you start to look at it. Yeah.
Absolutely, because I tried to make these formulas for my patients. And I was confused. I was like, okay, just by default, just go back to the original text. That's just what you do, right? I thought. And so, you read something like Mazarin 1 and you go, okay, Ho Ma Ren, 2 Sheng, Xiao Yao, half a Jin, Zhe Shi, 8 Liang, Xing Ren, 1 Sheng, 1 Che, 1 Jin. I have no idea what this guy's talking about. How am I supposed to do this?
Right. What's the dang measurement?
What's the measurement? What's the gram measurement? So I study, everyone says, oh yeah, it's the 1 Liang 3 grams. And I was like, oh really? Okay, that's interesting. And then I try, okay, well how come, okay, let's just Guijia Tang, 3 Liang of Guijia versus 12 pieces of dart sao. Oh yeah, but that's a lot of dart sao, don't you think, when you look at it physically? And then I remember teachers saying, oh yeah, you just reduce the dart sao to 6 pieces or 3 pieces or whatever they do. And I was, oh, okay, so you're saying that Zhang Jing's wrong? Oh no, but the dart sao, no one knows what the size of a dart sao. I was like, well, I just was on the Thai-Burma border and there's dart sao trees there.
Right, you know what a dart sao
haven't changed. I know what a dart sao tree looks like. We used to pick them. And, okay. So and they haven't changed for years and years and years. So what's the problem? And anyway, so that really started to spike my interest. And so I went up to Arnaud and Arnaud, I said, I thought that I've been doing some research and I think that 1 Liang is 15.625 grams. And he said to me, okay, well, there's a lot of interesting ideas about that. Just come and speak to me when you've used Xiao Chaihu Tang with Chaihu at 125 grams.
Holy smokes.
And he was just kind of looked at me like, and do you have that experience? And I
wait a minute, hang on. I just got to ask.
Yeah.
Are we talking about a day, 2 days, 3 days?
1 day.
A day.
Yeah.
120 grams.
Half a gin.
Chaihu.
Yeah, half a gin, 8 Liang. So obviously, and Arnaud follows the tradition of his lineage, and which is, this is what his whole basis of his understanding is. It's fascinating. It's so precise, and I love it to bits. And so I took that as a personal challenge. So I went away and practiced. I tried to use it like these original dosages, and the results were astonishing.
Okay, so hang on for just a second. This is great. I'm imagining so damn many herbs. I don't even know if I could fit them in a pot that I have in my own kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one day's worth of herbs.
Yep.
And you were using this on your patients, or you tried it on your own self first?
I tried it on myself first, but
yeah, I suspected you would.
Yeah.
What was your experience when you took herbs at that kind of concentration?
Well, I'll just say before I did that, I did a lot of research. So I wanted to be sure, because when I read, Mitchell and Wiseman's Shanhan Lun, they talked about this measurement, 15.625 grams as 1 liang. And I thought, that's a very precise number. That's not something they've just plucked out of the air. 15.625 grams. What's happening here? So I tried to understand where it was from, and so went way back into the study and found out that it was actually from this measurement of a bell, a pitch pipe of a bell, and then you pack it full of broomcorn millet, and then that broomcorn millet is then weighed and counted out, and then that weight will equal half a liang, and then blah, 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 blah. You do all these things. And basically, you come to the conclusion that it's 15.625. And I say, well, I don't really believe that. I need to test that. So I went and became a specialist on broomcorn millet. So I studied the history of broomcorn millet, and then got the pitch pipe, and then packed it, and then counted out the little seeds one by one, and then weighed it.
I'm still not sure how a snowboard dude turns into someone like you.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, well, my dad's a PhD in algebra, so this kind of stuff, I guess I got to a certain age and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I think I might look into this a little bit, the mathematics of it. So I kept studying and started to work out, the Sheng measurement, the Liang measurement, the Chu measurement, which was a really interesting one, because a Sheng measurement's a volume measurement, and no one argues this measurement. So what happens when you take a Sheng measurement and you mix it with a Liang measurement is you've got a volume measurement and a weight measurement. So when we do medicine, we're talking about ratio. And when I was making these pills and powders for my patients, it was all about ratio. So Wu Mei Wan, for example. So when I made Wu Mei Wan for the first time, if I did it with the current weighing system, it would basically just turn into a big goo. But when I weighed it out according to the old measurements and the study associated with those old measurements, it was perfect. I'm talking when you made the dough, it just, your hands were clean at the end. It was just perfectly rolled out, this amount of pills. And then I thought, well, this is interesting. Why does one total pill only weigh, let's say, 500 grams, whereas another pill is this huge, massive amount that weighs 5 kilos? Why didn't Zhang Wenjing just say 1 part this, 1 part that, 1 part this? And people translate the word fen as part, but it's not. It's a measurement. It's 3.4 grams. 3.9 grams, sorry. So,
well, it depends on how you are looking at fun, because fun can have multiple meanings. It could mean a part of.
It can.
Right? English has the same kind of thing. You have to understand the context.
Exactly. So when it's in the context of the relationship with a Liang measurement, as in Wuling San, then it's a measurement. It's not a part. You can't have 1 Liang of something and then 1 fen of something, because, do you know what I mean? Because it also can be a weight. So because it's a division of a Liang.
If you're dividing things, otherwise it stands for a certain amount of something.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So if it's all fen, if the measurement's all in fen, then you can say, okay, it's just 1 part this, 1 part that. Is that correct? You obviously know more about, you know much more about the linguistics of it.
I was thinking if the measurement is all in fen, then it would be more like a weight, this much of this much of that. But if you're talking about that, you might be using this many liang and this many sheng and that kind of thing, and then you divide it into so many fen, then you're dividing it into so many pieces.
Right.
That's my thought. But you're more of an expert on this than I am. I have not made these traditional medicines.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down. It does come down to actually physically doing it. And when you physically do it,
Yeah.
you realize, wow, this is really precise. This is exactly when I'm making it. And what the other things were interesting about it was that what I found was really fascinating was that, okay, why is this thing 500 grams? Why is this thing 15 kilos? And then we divide it by the size of the pills. And what we can actually do is we can determine the amount of time that this is supposed to be administered. So why is Lijiang 1 only for a couple of days, whereas Wumei 1 is for 6 months, 4 to 6 months? Or Dahuang
Oh my
Zhejiang
God,
1,
someone's got to take Ume-1 for 6 months?
they do.
Ugh.
They do. And guess why it doesn't work in 3 days when people take it? People use it for 3 days. Like, oh, it didn't work. Yeah, because you're supposed to take it for 6 months. And other interesting things happen because of that based on the 5 element, and some of the observations. But the thing about it, which I thought was really fascinating, is that it allows you to give your patients prognosis. So you can be sure that, okay, you've got to, in 6 months, this is what we expect to happen. You have to be taking consistently for this period of time. And because the question is, why did Zhongjing do it like that? And then started looking at some of the formulas that were associated with pregnancy, and found that the exact weights of those formulas, so something like Dangwei-san, Dangwei-Xiaya-san, those formulas, the weights of those formulas, and when you divide them by the dose of the daily administration versus the total weight, you can gather how many days it's supposed to be taken for, and that exactly coincides with one trimester, which is just awesome.
Imagine this. A patient walks into your clinic. They're carrying more than the pain in their body. There's a story there. A history woven with the stress of long days, the ache of things unsaid, and the quiet longing for something to shift. You listen, not just with your ears, but with your hands, your intuition, your heart. It's not just about needles or a formula. It's about connection. Understanding the threads that tie us together, mind, body, and spirit. That is where golden flower Chinese herbs comes in. Rooted in tradition and crafted with care, their formulas are more than herbs. They're a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern practice. Every bottle, a quiet partner in your work, helping you to meet your patients where they are. Because healing isn't just about treating symptoms. It's about creating trust, cultivating belonging, and helping someone feel truly seen. Golden Flower Chinese Herbs, your partner in practice and connection, where tradition meets care. What's a good thing you've got some math in your background. I am curious about 6 months at Umewan.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me more about, it's hard for me to imagine someone taking that delicious formula for 6 months. What kind of situation would we be looking at where somebody would be administering it for 6 months?
Well, enduring diarrhea is one of the first indications for it. Pain below the umbilicus is one of the main indications for Wu Mei. It goes all the way back to the Shennon Benxiaojing. The withering flesh. So when somebody has a dysbiosis, the dysbiosis can act to destroy some of the C-reactive protein in the skin because it consumes that, and then the skin will lose that elasticity and look like dead and withering skin, which is one of the primary indications for it, for Wu Mei in particular. And then, of course, you have the pulse that indicates the Wu Mei 1, which is depending on your lineage, you have to, if you have that diagnostics. And then, you can get stool samples for blastocystis hominis and any kind of dientamoebas. It works amazingly for.
So basically, if you have some sort of terrible parasitic infection,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to take this for 6 months to resolve it. It's going to take some time.
Yeah, and I found that one of the interesting things when I was prescribing it a lot was that it's very, very effective for rheumatic arthritis. They originally had this case where this patient came in and she'd had rheumatoid arthritis crippling, ulnar deviated, and she was quite deformed from this long-term, over 20-year rheumatic arthritis, and just in constant pain for that time. And it took about 6 months on the Wu Mei one before she started seeing her pain decrease. Well, she started seeing pain decreasing around about 4 months, but I told her you need to stay on to 6 months, stay on to 6 months. And it's interesting because people go through these big phases of, when the parasites start speaking to their mind, the parasitologists, and how they've documented all this incredible, the parasites start releasing all these cytotoxins that make you think that whatever you're doing is wrong for you, and then they refuse that, and they can manipulate your mind quite interestingly. And when they start doing that, so they try to get off the formula, and you just got to convince them, no, remember I told you that you've got to be taking this for 6 months and you would have this symptom. Remember I told you that you were going to complain and you were going to say that. You can tell them this early at the beginning. And this is the other thing about this prognosis, is you can educate them on the way through. Don't worry, maybe next month it's going to start to happen. And then they have to follow a very strict diet plan, which is all stipulated in the classics. Like, nothing that I'm saying is not in the classics. It's all there. The first time I used it was when I had this young girl at this orphanage at this Thai Burma border, and she was vomiting roundworms. So I was like, oh my gosh, I never thought I'd ever see this. You go to school and, oh yeah, when people are vomiting roundworms, you give Wu Mei one, you're probably never going to see this. All of a sudden this girl's like vomiting roundworms. Wow, awesome. So we use Wu Mei one, and yeah, cured her, So yeah, so they're some of the interesting things in clinic is with rheumatic arthritis. I'm not sure I completely understand how it works and why, but I've just seen it over and over and over. But it's just, it's just anecdotal.
You've seen it be effective.
Yeah, it's just my anecdotal experience, but I encourage people to try it.
I want to go back to something you just said a moment ago about modern day parasitologists talk about parasites as having an influence on a person's mental outlook. I'm not familiar with this. Can you tell us more about it?
Well, as far as I know, there's lots of research on how the parasites can release toxins as they die off. They release this toxin into the system, or they can actually do that if they're under threat, to convince the nervous system or to convince the mind that they need to stop doing what they're doing and do something else, because this is just a way of them surviving. But obviously we've lived in a symbiotic relationship with many, many parasites for many, many years, and we continue to do so. But it's just about that balance of healthy bacteria and parasites in the system, which allows for the optimization of our system.
It certainly raises the question, doesn't it, of how many of the thoughts we have are actually our thoughts then? Yeah,
that's true.
Well, that's an interesting rabbit hole, but one I'm probably not wanting to go down at this moment. So coming back for a moment to the amount of herbs that was traditionally used in Shanghan formulas. In your clinical work today, what kind of dosing do you use?
Well, because these, what we call Han dosing formulas, are extremely large and they're obviously expensive, we use very, very good quality herbs and therefore expensive or more expensive herbs, they become very unaffordable for people. Now, you've got to factor all these things into clinic and, of course, patient compliance. But I think that patient compliance is more often than not, a cop-out of the practitioner rather than the patient. I think if you ask the patient, I can get you better in a week and it's going to cost you $100, or I can get you better in 4 months and it's going to cost you $20 a month, a week or whatever it is. They're going to take, if you gave people that choice, I think they would choose to get better quicker. If you say this is more effective, if people ask you, this is more effective, what's more effective? If you answer honestly, well, bulk herbs are more effective, then I think that if you were sick, you would really want that choice. If then it comes down to, okay, well, so you've got someone well, you've given them advice, look, I'm going to use this huge dose of herbs in a short period of time, because that's all Zhang Renjing did. We don't know how long he gave those decoctions for. So we can calculate, and I've calculated all the formulas in the Shanhan Zabin Lun, all the pills and the powders, down to the day, down to the half day in some cases, how long they're supposed to be taken for, at what dose, etc., etc. But we don't know how long those decoctions were given for because we lost the Tang Yijing, and perhaps that information was in that. But all we know is how to cook them, the preparation of how to cook them and how to administer them and what foods to avoid, etc.
Right, because that's all in the Sanghan Lun.
But what we can assume more often than not, it's down to 3 sheng. It boils down to 3 sheng at the end, regardless of what we're doing at the start. It boils down to 3 sheng, which is 600 mils, and then it's given 1 sheng 3 times a day. So basically, that 600 mils will be given at 200 mils 3 times a day. So this at the daily dose. Sometimes it'll cross over, like Tao Ching Chi Tang will cross over into a day and a half, or other formulas will slightly vary. Take 2 doses today and then 1 dose tomorrow, or something like that. But the majority of the time, that's what it is. So we know, okay, it's definitely for a day's dose because he's not saying any more. But it doesn't mean he's not saying, well, do this every single day, or do it, let's say it's a Taiyang disease, or do it for 1 day, Yang Lin for 2, Shaoyang disease for 3. We don't know. There's no way of knowing, and et cetera, through the confirmations. But for chronic conditions, who knows? Just take till the disease gets better. I mean, in our case, nowadays, we just take till the pulse gets better.
Well, or the patient starts to feel better. We notice things are changing for them.
That's right. But if the pulse is still there, sometimes that takes precedent, just depending on what your system is. But yeah, so we don't know. So we came up with a different idea of doing different scales of dosing. So we did Han dose, and we did what we called at 10. So taking 1 liang as equaling 10 grams. And then just for mathematics, it's quite quick to dispense. Okay, it's 4 liang of this, just 40 grams of that, 3 liang of this, 30 grams of that. Just quick to do. But then it becomes complicated when you get the pieces and then the sheng measurement. So we built calculators that do all that stuff, and I built an app that does that. And then we did at the 10 dose and then at 5 dose. So basically taking that liang dose, timesing it by 10, and then halving it. So you're taking each liang to equal 5 grams. Mm-hmm. And then also just the common 3 liang, because I was following Arno Vasilis's system, so we would take that dose as well. So there was a kind of dosage range. But the most important thing about that is when we were administering the formula, we were administering it with a proper cooking process. So you have different processes of cooking which do different things to the formula, changes the synergy of the formula. For example, any kind of xiexintang, so gansao, shengjiang, or bangsha xiexintang, when you cook that formula, you cook it from roughly 2.4 mils down to 1200. Then you remove the herbs, and then you take the liquid and you boil the liquid down to 600, 6 sheng down to 3 sheng. In that process, you're harmonizing the flavors and it's the same in the case of Xiao Chahu Tang, same in the case of Chahu Guiji Ganjiang Tang. Those formulas are harmonizing formulas. So you have to harmonize them when you cook them. This part of the process is absolutely imperative. And any of your listeners want to try this for themselves, I would encourage you, do a decoction. It's a very interesting process. Do a decoction of that formula and just basically boil it down from 2.2 or 2.4 liters down to 600, just from herbs all the way. Do your double cooks or whatever the way that people do things nowadays. And then do it and then remove the herbs and then boil the liquid. The taste and the flavor, you can literally, if you've got a good enough palate, you can taste the way that the flavors have blended into each other and have balanced each other out. It's cooking. This is an art. And we're taking the art out.
So the cooking is a totally different. I mean, I'm thinking about the way I learned to cook herbs. You do it for 45 minutes, spill it out. You put some water in, another 30 minutes, spill it out, put them together.
Sure, that's true for some formulas, but some of the formulas that's what they're supposed to be doing. They're just like single message to the body, simple system. But when you're using more complicated formulas, you need to harmonize them. Especially harmonizing formulas, you harmonize the flavor. It's like saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to cook some. I'm just going to cook some food for you, and I'm just going to throw everything into a pot and just cook it for a bit." Rather than, I'm going to get the onions, I'm going to get the garlic and put it through a bit of, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to, think about a curry. Think about the complexities of an Indian curry, the way that when the spices are added and how that changes the flavor. This is a flavor medicine as well. We're using these flavors to have physiological actions on the body. We're trying to harmonize. We're trying to get a physiological response with flavor: bitter, descending, pungent, dispersing, etc. So we need to be able to use these flavors, and if we don't have them and we don't balance them right, then it's not like we're not going to still get effect, but it's just like what potential could our medicine really have, or what and we've got this literature which is the classical information, which is just so informative. And then when we have these formulas that are decocted, what we have the water-soluble aspects of the herbs. So when we have powders, we're doing something different, where we're taking that powder into the stomach. So it's opening into the stomach. As opposed to a pill, where we have the pills have honey, and honey has a few different purposes. One is it naturally preserves the herbs in their state, which is great. It's very, very convenient. But more than that, the honey is an ingredient in the pill. So it has antibacterial properties. But what it also does is it acts as a slow release mechanism. So what we're saying when we use a pill like that is that it opens into the small intestine. In the same way that Western medicine coats different substances in different mediums. So veggie cap opens into the stomach versus a gelatin cap, which opens into the small intestine. When that pill opens into the small intestine, what we're doing is we're using certain herbs that we want to get into the bloodstream. And then when we combine them with another medicinal substance, which is rice wine, that rice wine allows for the permeability through the walls of the small intestine. So when we take a pill, it goes into the stomach, it doesn't open into the stomach, then it travels into the small intestine, and then you take the alcohol with it, and then the alcohol allows that herb to go into the walls of the small intestine, which is where we absorb all our nutrients. So something like anything that has Shengdi Huang in it is taken with alcohol. The reason Shengdi Huang is now prepared over the years into something like Shodi Huang, and it's prepared with wine, is because it's very, very cloying on the stomach, and it can cause diarrhea very easily. And you often give it to patients with deficiency taxation. So, for example, if we take two examples of Da Huang Zhe Chongman and Shenxi Wan, or Ba Wei Di Huang Wan, both those formulas are in the deficiency taxation chapter of the Jingwei. And both of those formulas have Shengdi Huang in them. In fact, all the formulas that have Shengdi, or I should say more specifically Gandhi Huang, so dried Romania, all those formulas are taken with alcohol. But in the case of the pills, what you're doing is you're getting that Shengdi and it's going into the small intestine. Now, you don't want to lose that medicinal by just it not being able to digest and then going out the stool, which is very typical of Shengdi. So we put it in a pill, it hits the small intestine, we mix it with alcohol, it gets through the walls of the small intestine, it gets straight into the bloodstream, which is very interesting. So then when you get into clinic, and I encourage your listeners to try this themselves, when you take it as a pill, when you take it as a powder or you take it as a decoction, the water soluble won't cause as much problems, but it's just going to open into the stomach. And the water soluble aspect, the things that aren't water soluble in Shengdi, you're not going to absorb. So, but when you have it as a pill, you can take it without the alcohol, and what happens? People get bloating and then diarrhea, and then they get without the alcohol.
But if you take it with the alcohol,
if you take it with the alcohol, no problems whatsoever.
You're going to get less digestive distress and you're going to get more absorption.
We found that you get no digestive distress. You just get the herbs. So what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is we're missing out on the wrong herb. We're using the wrong herb. And then we're missing out on we got the wrong dose. And then we're not administering it correctly. So we got all these problems. And then what happens at the end of the day when the formula doesn't work? We blame ourselves. It's not true. We should be blaming all these we should be, slowly breaking away all these layers until there's, okay, I still got it wrong. All right, back to my diagnosis.
Right. Well, I mean, in some ways, we should blame ourselves. If we're not administering the herbs in the proper way, then it's up to us to make sure that herbs are going in the proper way, to make sure that we're going to get the effects that we want. So what I think I hear you saying is we might be spot on with our diagnosis, but the way that we are preparing or administering herbs might be less than optimal. And so the results aren't good. The diagnosis is on, but we've actually failed in the way that we're getting herbs into people. Is that right? Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds right.
So give us we're getting toward the end of this here. Give us a little primer on some ways that our average herbalist here in the West, that includes the United States, Europe, Australia, how can we think about dosing or administering our herbs in a way that might get us to be a little bit more effective?
I think just by observing those foundations and trying to use those formulas in the way they were originally used, I think that's a really, really good place to start, because they are the foundations of our medicine. And if we're not sort of taking that as, I hate to say gospel, but if we're not using those foundations, it's very difficult to get forward, especially as new practitioners. One of my favorite formulas, or not, if my favorite formula is Gunsao tongue, and it's just Gunsao, and it's just it's the best formula, and we're underappreciating these things. So it's incredibly good for croup. So but at the proper dose. So Gunsao at 2 liang, which equals roughly 30 grams, taken with 600 mils of water, boiled down to 300, and then take 100 3 times a day. If a child takes that for 3 days in a row, as soon as they have that first sign of croup, the croup will go away. Because croup's a 3-day cycle, it works incredibly well. Now, of course, you want to use the best quality Gunsao you want. You probably wanted Wildcraft, or I know you guys got access to organic Gunsao over there. So if you can get that, that's great. Or Wildcraft is even better.
Yeah, it's a little harder to come by.
Yeah, it is. It is getting harder and harder for sure. But that would be a great place to start. Just don't underestimate the power of the simplicity of our medicine. Li Zhongwan, it's just incredible formula. So yeah, that's a really, really good place to start. And then we can grow forward. And then we're appreciating the classics, because at the end of the day, we're claiming this medicine we're claiming the empirical evidence of this medicine. We're saying when we use Chinese medicine, we're using thousands of years of history in our diagnosis and in our application. But the actual fact is we're not. We're using things that are modern. Granules are 50 years old. So we've never dispensed this in the classical times. Up till before 50 years, no one was even using this stuff. So we can't really claim the history of Chinese medicine. We need to be able to say, well, if we want to claim the history of Chinese medicine, we have to use the medicine as it was originally intended.
So this is a provocative statement. I mean, it sounds like you're a very old school type of practitioner. You're you really go to the Shanghanlun. You're looking not just at the original doses, you're looking at, maybe even more importantly, because it sounds like you've been experimenting with different dosages over time. But what you're really focusing on here is the methods of preparation.
Yeah, absolutely. And administration. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Simon, anything else that, first of all, thank you. This has been a delightful conversation that goes from snowboarding to cooking herbs. Anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners before we wind this down?
No, I just want to say to you, Michael, I appreciate the opportunity, and I love what you're doing, and it's a real honor to be part of the podcast, and I hope people get something out of it, and I hope it's beneficial.
Well, I've got news for you. There wouldn't be a podcast if I didn't have interesting cats like you to talk to. Well, that is it for today's show. Wow, hey, what a journey Simon had, huh? You never know where this stuff just might take you. It's easy to think, oh yeah, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to do a clinic, but oh my God, you could end up anywhere. And that's before or after your studies. Hey, if you like the podcast, please share it with your friends, because that's what friends do, share good things with each other. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.